Millionaire gives card to son. But the destiny he chooses for Nanny shocks everyone. Jonathan Reynolds took a deep breath as he pulled the platinum credit card from his wallet. His son, Ethan, was turning 8, and he wanted to make up for another absence with a special gift. "Here, son. You can buy whatever you want for your birthday," said Jonathan, extending the gold card to the blonde boy in a blue shirt. Ethan held the card with his small hands, feeling the weight of the special plastic. His blue eyes shone, but not in the way his father expected. Instead of running to the tablet to shop online, the boy looked at Miss Dorothy, the nanny who was organizing some toys near the new car that had arrived with a big red bow. "Miss Dorothy," called Ethan, running to the black woman in the beige uniform, "I want to use this card to pay for your mother's surgery." The silence that followed was deafening. Jonathan felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Dorothy stopped folding the boy's little clothes and turned slowly, her eyes wide with surprise. "Ethan, my angel, what are you saying?" Dorothy knelt to the boy's height, trying to process what she had just heard. "I hear you crying on the phone every day," said Ethan, with the seriousness of someone carrying a very heavy weight for his age. "You say your mother needs the operation but doesn't have the money." Jonathan felt his chest tighten. In 3 years of work in the house, Dorothy had never mentioned personal problems. He barely knew details of the employee's life, only that she was punctual, took good care of Ethan, and was discreet. "Son, come back here," Jonathan called, his voice a little shaky. "This card is for you to buy your birthday presents." "But I don't need anything else, Dad," Ethan replied without letting go of the card. "I have a room full of toys I don't even use." "Ms. Dorothy needs it more." Dorothy tried to take the card from the boy's hand, but he hid it behind his back. Tears began to roll down her face. "Ethan, you don't understand. That's a lot of money. Your family worked hard to have this good life." "But you work hard too," Ethan retorted. "You take care of me every day, make me delicious lunches, help me with my homework. My dad only shows up to sleep." The phrase cut Jonathan like a blade. He approached his son, trying to stay calm. "Ethan, give me that card now. You don't understand how money works." "Yes, I do," the boy replied, taking a step back. "I understand that Miss Dorothy is suffering and I can help." Jonathan looked at Dorothy, who had her head down, clearly embarrassed by the situation. He had never paid enough attention to notice that the employee was going through difficulties. "Dorothy, is this true? Is your mother sick?" Dorothy wiped her tears with the back of her hand before answering. "Mr. Jonathan, I didn't want to bother the family with my personal problems. My mother is 67 years old and needs gallbladder surgery. Her insurance doesn't cover it, and I've been trying to save the money for months." "Why didn't you tell me anything?" "It's not my job to bring problems into this house, sir. My job is to take good care of Ethan." "And you take very good care of me," Ethan interrupted, running to hug Dorothy's legs. "That's why I want to help you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jonathan felt a mixture of pride and shame. Pride for his son's generous heart. Shame for having failed to know the people who worked in his own home. "Ethan, let's talk in my office," Jonathan said, trying to regain control of the situation. "I won't go without Miss Dorothy," the boy replied, still clinging to the nanny. "Ethan, you can't make decisions with your father's money," Dorothy tried to explain. "That's not right. But he said I could buy whatever I wanted, and I want to buy health for your mother." The boy's simple and pure logic left both adults speechless. Jonathan ran his hand through his hair, trying to find a way out of this unexpected situation. At that moment, Dorothy's phone rang. She hesitated before answering, but the insistent sound forced her to pick up the device. "Hello, Mum?" Her voice changed completely upon hearing what was on the other end of the line. "What? What do you mean they kicked you out of the hospital?" Jonathan saw Dorothy's face, pale. Ethan let go of the hug and looked at her worriedly. "Mum, you can't go home in this condition. The doctor said it's urgent." Dorothy tried to step away for privacy, but Ethan followed her. Jonathan also approached, unable to pretend disinterest. "I know I don't have the money now, but—" Dorothy stopped talking when she realized she was being watched. Mom, I'll figure something out. You'll go back to the hospital tomorrow. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. Ethan immediately took her hand. Miss Dorothy, now I'm even more sure. Let's use my father's card. Ethan, that's not how it works, Jonathan finally spoke. You can't just decide how to spend money that isn't yours. But you said it was my birthday present, Ethan argued. If it's my present, I can choose what to do with it. His son's argument put Jonathan in a tight spot. Technically, the boy was right. He had given Ethan free rein to use the card as he wished. Son, when I said that, I was thinking of toys, clothes, maybe a new video game. I don't want any of that. I want Miss Dorothy's mother to get better. Dorothy knelt again and held Ethan's small hands. My angel, you have a heart of gold, but this isn't your responsibility. I'll figure something out. How? Ethan asked with the typical frankness of children. You already sold your bracelet, your ring, and even that watch you liked so much. I saw you crying when you had to sell it. Jonathan felt a tightness in his chest. How had he not noticed that his employee was selling off personal belongings? How had he been so blind to the suffering of someone who spent more time with his son than he did? Ethan, you shouldn't be paying attention to these things, Jonathan said. But his voice came out softer than intended. I pay attention to everything that happens to Miss Dorothy because she takes care of me. When you travel, she's the one who stays with me when I have nightmares. When I get sick, she's the one who takes me to the doctor. She's like a second mother to me. His son's words hit Jonathan hard. He traveled so much for work that he had missed important milestones in Ethan's life. How many times had Dorothy taken on responsibilities that should have been his? Mr. Jonathan, Dorothy stood up, her voice firm despite the tears. I can't let Ethan do this. I'll resign if necessary. No, Ethan shouted, clinging to her again. You can't leave. Why not? Jonathan asked, surprised by his own question. Because she's the most important person in my life after you and Mommy, Ethan replied without hesitation. And sometimes I feel like she understands me better than you do. The weight of those words fell on Jonathan like a ton of bricks. His 8-year-old son was saying that the household employee was one of the most important people in his life. As a father, this should have been a red flag. Dorothy was clearly moved, but tried to maintain her professional composure. Ethan, I love taking care of you, but that doesn't change the fact that I can't accept this favor. It's not a favor. It's a gift, Ethan insisted. My dad said I can buy whatever I want, and I want to buy your mom's surgery. Dorothy's phone rang again. This time she answered more reluctantly. Hi, Miss Nancy, she said, and Jonathan realized it wasn't her mother calling. What do you mean the health insurance cancelled everything? The conversation continued with Dorothy asking increasingly desperate questions. Jonathan caught scattered words, denied procedures, lack of payment, deadline. When she hung up, Dorothy was visibly shaken. Miss Dorothy, what happened? Ethan asked, holding her hand. My mother's health insurance was cancelled. They said they didn't receive the payment for the last 2 months. But didn't you pay? Jonathan asked. I did, but the money wasn't complete. I sold some things to get half. I thought I could negotiate the rest next month. Now they say she can no longer have the surgery through the insurance. How much does the private surgery cost? Jonathan surprised himself by asking. Dorothy hesitated before answering. $15,000, sir. For Jonathan, $15,000 was what he spent on a business dinner without a second thought. For Dorothy, it was an impossible amount to gather working as a nanny. Dad, you see? Ethan said, waving the card. That's why I need to use this card. Ethan, put that card away right now. A woman's voice interrupted the conversation. The three turned to see Victoria, Jonathan's wife, approaching. She had just arrived from a spa session and clearly wasn't prepared for the scene she encountered. Mom, Ethan ran to her. You need to help Miss Dorothy. Help how? Victoria asked, looking suspiciously at the nanny. Her mother needs surgery, and Daddy gave me this card to buy whatever I wanted for my birthday. I want to buy the surgery. Victoria looked at Jonathan with an expression he knew well. It was the expression she made when she thought he had completely lost control of a situation. Jonathan, explain to me what this is all about. It's exactly what Ethan said, Jonathan replied, feeling like a child being scolded. And you're considering letting our 8-year-old son pay for an employee's surgery? Mom, she's not an employee. She's Ms. Dorothy, Ethan corrected. And I'm not paying for her. I'm paying for her grandma to get better. Victoria knelt to her son's height, trying to use a softer tone. Honey, that's a lot of money, and it's not our responsibility. Why not? Ethan asked with the purity of someone who truly doesn't understand adult social rules. Because every family takes care of their own problems, Victoria tried to explain. But Miss Dorothy takes care of our family's problems, Ethan retorted. When you were sick last year, who stayed with me? When Dad was away for 2 weeks, who helped me with my homework? Victoria was left speechless. It was true that Dorothy had taken on far more responsibilities than a typical nanny would. That's different, Ethan. She's paid to take care of you, and I want to use my gift money to take care of her mother. The circular logic of the conversation was frustrating everyone. Jonathan realized he needed to make a decision, but every option seemed to bring complicated consequences. Dorothy, he called, can you give us a minute? Of course, Mr. Jonathan. Ethan, come with me to help organize your toys. I don't want to organize toys now, Ethan answered. I want to solve Miss Dorothy's problem. Ethan, go with her now. Jonathan spoke in a tone that brooked no argument. Reluctantly, Ethan accompanied Dorothy, but not before hiding the card in his pants pocket. As soon as they were alone, Victoria exploded. Jonathan, have you completely lost your mind? How could you give a child a credit card with no limit? It was for him to buy birthday presents. I thought he'd want a video game or something like that. And now he wants to bankroll the nanny's family. Do you realize how this will look? People will think we're obligated to support our employees. Victoria, the woman's mother needs urgent surgery. So what? That's not our problem. If she can't pay her own medical expenses, maybe she should look for another job. His wife's coldness shocked Jonathan. He wasn't a particularly generous person himself, but the situation had touched something in him that he couldn't ignore. Did you hear our son? He considers Dorothy one of the most important people in his life. And that's a problem, Jonathan. Our son is too attached to an employee. That's not healthy. Why isn't it healthy? Because she's not family. She's paid to take care of him. If we let this confusion happen, Ethan will grow up without understanding social boundaries. Jonathan fell silent, processing his wife's words. Part of him agreed with her logic, but another part was disturbed by the coldness of her reasoning. Victoria, $15,000 is nothing to us. It's not about the money, it's about the precedent. If we do this now, what will stop other employees from coming to us with similar problems? Dorothy never asked for anything. She didn't even tell us about the situation. Exactly, and that's how it should stay. The employees' personal lives shouldn't interfere with their work. At that moment, they heard raised voices coming from Ethan's room. Jonathan and Victoria ran to see what was happening. They found Ethan locked in the bedroom's bathroom, shouting through the door, "I'm not coming out of here until you let me help Miss Dorothy. Ethan, open this door right now." Jonathan knocked on the wood. "No, you'll take the card from me." Dorothy was outside, visibly distressed. "Ethan, please open the door. This isn't anyone's fault." "It's my parents' fault for not wanting to help you." Victoria sighed loudly, clearly annoyed by the situation. "Great. Now our son is throwing a tantrum over an employee. She's not just an employee to him," Jonathan murmured. "Dorothy," Victoria turned to the nanny, "you need to fix this situation. Convince him to come out." "Miss Victoria, I've already tried. He's very determined." "Ethan," Victoria knocked on the door. "If you don't come out in 5 minutes, I'll cancel your birthday." "I don't care. I don't want a birthday anymore if I can't help my friend." The word friend echoed in the room. Ethan hadn't called Dorothy his nanny or employee. To him, she was simply his friend. "Let me try," Dorothy asked for permission and approached the door. "Ethan, if you come out, I promise we'll talk about this. Talking is useless. Adults just talk and do nothing. I do things for you every day." "You do, but my parents won't let me do things for you." Dorothy looked at Jonathan and Victoria, clearly unsure how to proceed. "Ethan." Jonathan tried a different approach. "If you come out, I promise we'll find a solution." "What kind of solution?" "We'll calmly talk about how to help Miss Dorothy." There was silence on the other side of the door. Then they heard the sound of the lock opening. Ethan came out of the bathroom with eyes red from crying, but still holding the card firmly. "You promised, Dad." "I did promise. Let's all sit down and talk together." They gathered in the living room. Ethan sat on Dorothy's lap, who tried to protest but was stopped by Jonathan's look. "Dorothy," Jonathan began, "tell us exactly what's going on with your mother." Dorothy took a deep breath before answering. "My mother, Ms. Margaret, is 67 years old. 3 months ago, she started having terrible stomach pains. I took her to the doctor, and we found out she needs to have her gallbladder removed. The doctor said it's urgent because it could get complicated." "What about her health insurance?" "She always paid it on time, but when my father passed away last year, it became hard to keep up with the payments. I tried to take over, but with my salary I could barely cover half." "Why didn't you come to me?" Jonathan asked. "Mr. Jonathan, my job here is to take care of Ethan. I didn't want to mix personal problems with work." "But you couldn't hide it from me," Ethan said, stroking Dorothy's arm. "I saw you crying on the phone." "What else do you know about this?" Victoria asked her son. "I know she sold the bracelet her boyfriend gave her, her grandmother's ring that was very special, and also the watch she got when she graduated." Dorothy closed her eyes, clearly embarrassed by the exposure. "What did she graduate in?" Jonathan asked, realizing he knew practically nothing about his employee's past. "Education," Dorothy answered softly. "You're a teacher." "I was. I worked 5 years at a private school, but when my mother got sick, I had to leave to take care of her. Being a nanny gives me more flexible hours." Jonathan was discovering that Dorothy was much more qualified than he imagined. She had given up her career to care for her sick mother. "Why did you never mention this?" he asked. "I didn't think it was relevant to my work here." "I think it's relevant," Ethan said. "That's why you're so good at helping me with homework." Victoria seemed bothered by these revelations. It was harder to remain distant when she knew more about Dorothy's story. "And now? What's your mother's current medical situation?" Jonathan continued asking. "She's at home taking pain medication, but the doctor said she can't wait much longer. At any moment there could be serious complications." "How long?" Ethan asked with concern. "The doctor said 2 weeks at most." "Then we don't have time to waste," Ethan said, taking the card from his pocket. "Can we go to the hospital now?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Victoria sighed heavily. "Jonathan, you need to handle this. We can't let our son think he can make financial decisions of this magnitude." "But Mom, you spend that much in 1 day of shopping," Ethan argued. The observation hit home. It was true that Victoria regularly spent similar amounts on unnecessary shopping. "This is different, Ethan." "Why is it different?" Because it is," Victoria finished, clearly without a logical explanation. Jonathan realized he needed to make a decision. All options had consequences, but prolonging the situation wasn't helping anyone. "Dorothy, will you accept help?" "Mr. Jonathan, I can't accept that much money. It would be too embarrassing." "What if it wasn't a donation? What if it was a loan?" Dorothy's eyes lit up with a possibility she hadn't considered. "A loan I could accept." "No," Ethan protested. "I want to give it as a gift, not lend it." "Ethan," Jonathan knelt to his son's level. "Sometimes helping someone isn't just about giving money. Sometimes it's about giving them the possibility to keep their dignity." "I don't understand." "Ms. Dorothy takes pride in her work. If we give her the money, she might feel bad about not having managed on her own. But if we lend it to her, she can pay it back little by little and feel good about herself." Ethan thought for a moment. "But what if she can't pay it back?" "Then we forgive the debt and turn it into a gift," Jonathan replied, looking at Dorothy. "But we bet she'll manage." Dorothy was clearly moved. "I could pay it back, yes. You could deduct it from my salary gradually." "How long would you need?" Jonathan asked. "About 2 years, maybe 3 if it's a smaller amount each month." "And would you feel comfortable with that?" "Much more comfortable than with a donation." Victoria, who had stayed quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. "Jonathan, are you really considering this?" "I am. And you know why." "Why?" Because our 8-year-old son showed more compassion in one afternoon than we have in years. Maybe it's time we learned something from him. That's ridiculous. He's a child. Exactly, a child who saw something that we adults couldn't see. What exactly? That Dorothy isn't just an employee. She's someone who takes care of the most important person in our lives. And more than that, she's a good person going through a tough time. Ethan got off Dorothy's lap and went to his mother. Mom, do you remember when I was sick last year and you had to travel for work? I remember. Who stayed with me at the hospital all night? Victoria hesitated before answering. Ms. Dorothy. And do you remember when I had nightmares because of that movie you let me watch? I remember. Who stayed with me until I could fall asleep? Ms. Dorothy. And do you remember when I broke my arm and you were in that important meeting? Ethan, where are you going with this? I'm trying to say that Ms. Dorothy always took care of me when you couldn't. Now it's our turn to take care of her. The boy's words created a heavy silence in the room. It was impossible to deny the simple, pure logic of his argument. Besides, Ethan continued, you always say it's important to help people. At church, you put money in the collection basket to help the poor. Why can't we help Ms. Dorothy? Victoria was clearly out of arguments. Her son was using the very upbringing she had given him against her. It's different, Ethan. Mum, you've been repeating that same phrase for an hour. Explain to me why it's different. Dorothy stood up gently. Sir, ma'am, perhaps I should go home early today. Let you sort this out as a family. No, Ethan ran to her. You can't leave now. Ethan, your family needs to talk. You are part of my family, Ethan said, with a conviction that surprised everyone present. No, my dear. I work for your family. To me, you are family. Jonathan felt something stir in his chest. His son was expressing genuine love for someone who had practically raised him for the past 3 years. Dorothy, stay, Jonathan said. Ethan is right. You are part of this family, at least to him. Victoria looked at her husband in disbelief. Jonathan, you can't be serious. I am very serious. Victoria, when was the last time you helped Ethan with his homework? I work too, Jonathan. Dorothy works too. She works here, taking care of our son, and still finds time to help him with his studies, cook the foods he likes, take him to the doctor when needed. That's what she's paid for. She's paid to be a nanny, not a substitute mother. But that's what she ended up becoming because we aren't present enough. The discussion was revealing deeper problems in the family dynamic. Victoria was visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. So you're saying I'm a bad mother? I'm not saying that. I'm saying we may have delegated too many responsibilities to Dorothy, and now our son has developed a deep emotional bond with her. And you think that's normal? I think it's natural. Children become attached to those who care for them. Dorothy tried to intervene diplomatically. Sir, ma'am, I don't want to be the cause of arguments between you. You're not the cause of argument, Jonathan responded. We created this situation. Ethan, who had been quietly observing the adults, finally spoke. Why are you fighting? I just want to help Miss Dorothy. And you will help, Jonathan said, making a decision. Dorothy, tomorrow you'll come with me to the bank. We'll resolve this situation with your mother. Jonathan, Victoria protested. Victoria, the decision is made. We'll lend the money to Dorothy, she'll pay it back gradually, and everyone will be happy. What about Ethan? Won't he get a birthday present? This will be his present, Jonathan looked at his son. Isn't that right, Ethan? The boy smiled for the first time since the argument had begun. It's the best present I could get. But what about the card? Victoria asked. Jonathan extended his hand to Ethan, who hesitated for a moment before handing over the card. Thank you for trusting me, son. Are you really going to help Miss Dorothy? I am. Tomorrow. Ethan ran to hug his father, something that had happened few times in recent months due to Jonathan's busy schedule. Thank you, Dad. You're the best father in the world. The embrace moved Jonathan more than he expected. When was the last time his son had shown spontaneous physical affection? Dorothy was crying silently. Mr. Jonathan, I don't know how to thank you. No need to thank me. Ethan is right. You take care of our family. Now it's our turn to take care of you. I'll pay everything back, I promise. I know you will, and even if you couldn't, it wouldn't be a problem. Victoria left the room without saying anything, clearly unhappy with her husband's decision. Jonathan knew he'd have another difficult conversation with her later, but at that moment, the joy on his son's face was worth any marital conflict. "Miss Dorothy," Ethan said, returning to her lap. "Now your mother will get better." "Yes, she will, my angel. Thanks to you. And thanks to my dad, too. And thanks to your dad, too." Jonathan sat beside them on the couch, feeling a closeness with his son that he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Dad, can I ask a question?" "Of course, Ethan. Why was it so hard to convince you to help Miss Dorothy? She's so good to us." The innocent question made Jonathan reflect on his own prejudices and limitations. "Sometimes adults get stuck in rules that don't always make sense, son." "What kind of rules?" "Rules about how people should relate to each other, about money, about work." "But did those rules stop you from helping a good person?" "Yes, they did. And that was wrong of us." "So sometimes it's right to break the rules?" Jonathan smiled at his son's perceptiveness. "Sometimes, yes, especially when the rules stop us from doing what's right." "And helping Miss Dorothy is right?" "Very right." Dorothy stroked Ethan's hair. "You know, you taught me a very important lesson today." "Me?" Ethan asked, surprised. "You taught me that sometimes we need to accept help. I was trying to handle everything alone and only making the situation worse. Is it like when I can't do my math homework alone and you help me?" "Exactly like that. So adults need help sometimes too." "Yes, we do. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help from people who care about us." Jonathan listened to this conversation with interest. Dorothy was teaching his son life lessons that he himself had failed to impart. "Dorothy," he said, "may I ask a personal question?" "Of course, Mr. Reynolds." "Do you like working here?" "Very much. Ethan is a wonderful child." "But what about your career? Don't you miss teaching?" Dorothy thought before answering. "I do miss it. But at this point in my life, taking care of Ethan and my mother are my priorities. What if we could combine both?" "How so?" "What if you continued caring for Ethan, but could also use your background in education? Perhaps by officially becoming his tutor, more actively helping with his studies." Dorothy's eyes lit up. "That would be a dream." "And it would be great for me too," Ethan said excitedly. "You could help me even more with my homework." "Let's talk about this in the coming days," Jonathan said, "but first let's resolve the situation with your mother." At that moment, Dorothy's phone rang again. She answered quickly. "Hello, Mom." Her expression changed to worry. "What? You're in pain again?" Jonathan and Ethan watched as Dorothy asked urgent medical questions. "Mom, did you take your medicine?" A pause. "I see. No, don't worry. Tomorrow morning we'll sort everything out." When she hung up, she was visibly shaken. Her pain has gotten much worse. She can barely move. "Miss Dorothy, do you want me to ask my dad to take you there now?" Ethan offered immediately. "No, my dear, it's not necessary." "Dorothy," Jonathan stood up, "I'll take you there now. You should be with your mother." "Mr. Reynolds, you don't have to. Tomorrow is fine." "It's not fine. You're worried and your mother is suffering. Let's go now." "Can I go too?" Ethan asked. "Better you stay here, son. But tomorrow, if Miss Dorothy allows it, you can meet her mother." "Really?" Ethan was thrilled. "If she's up for visitors, yes." Dorothy was moved by the family's kindness. "She would love to meet Ethan. I talk about him to her every day." "What do you say?" Ethan asked curiously. "I say you're the most special boy I've ever met, that you're smart, caring, and have a huge heart." "Is that true?" Ethan asked Jonathan. "Very true. And today you proved it." As they got ready to leave, Victoria returned to the room. "Where are you going?" "We're taking Dorothy to see her mother," Jonathan explained. "Now?" "Now. She's in a lot of pain." Victoria sighed but didn't protest. "Ethan, are you coming with me?" "No, Mum. I want to stay here and wait for Miss Dorothy to come back." "She won't be sleeping here tonight, Ethan. She'll be staying with her mother." "Oh," Ethan was visibly disappointed. "Then I'm going to miss her." Dorothy knelt down to his level. "I'll miss you too, but I'll be back tomorrow. And we'll start planning my mother's surgery. And then she'll be okay? Then she'll be great. Then it's worth missing her a little bit." The boy's simple wisdom touched everyone present. He had learned that some sacrifices are worth it when the goal is to help someone. On the way to Miss Margaret's house, Jonathan and Dorothy talked about practical details of the surgery. "Do you already have a doctor in mind?" he asked. "I do, Dr. Mitchell, who is very good. I was just waiting to get the money. First thing tomorrow we'll call him and schedule the surgery. Mr. Reynolds, I still can't believe this is happening." "Believe it. And you know what? Ethan taught me something very important today." "What was it?" "That generosity has no age, and that sometimes it's the children who show us the right way. He is very special, yes, and part of that is thanks to you. You helped raise a boy with solid values. I just took care of him with love, and that's exactly what makes the difference." When they arrived at Miss Margaret's house, a simple but well-kept home in a working-class neighborhood of New York, Jonathan met the woman who had raised Dorothy. Miss Margaret, even clearly weakened by pain, received Jonathan with the dignity and elegance typical of her generation. "Mr. Jonathan, it's a pleasure. Dorothy speaks highly of you and your family." "The pleasure is mine, Miss Margaret, and I apologize for not having met you sooner." Dorothy was always very private about her family problems. She didn't want to be a bother. She would never be a bother. On the contrary, we would have liked to help sooner. Jonathan was impressed with the house. Although simple, it was impeccably clean and organized. There were pictures of Dorothy graduating, diplomas on the wall, and some books on education. "You must be very proud of Dorothy," he commented. "I am. She was always a studious and dedicated girl. When her father passed, she took on all the responsibilities of the household." "How long have the two of you lived together?" "Since she started working at your house. Before that she lived alone, but when I started getting sick, she insisted I come live with her." Jonathan began to better understand the weight Dorothy was carrying. She had given up her independence to care for her mother. "Miss Margaret, tomorrow we will sort out your surgery. You don't have to worry about it anymore." "Mr. Jonathan, I don't know how to thank you. Dorothy told me about your boy's generosity. Ethan insisted we help. He has great admiration for Dorothy. She also speaks highly of him, says he's like a son to her. And the feeling is mutual. To Ethan, she is like a second mother." Dorothy, who was preparing tea for her mother, overheard the conversation from the kitchen. "Mom, tomorrow Mr. Jonathan is going to introduce you to Ethan." "Really?" Miss Margaret perked up despite the pain. "I've been dying to meet that boy. He's also eager to meet you. I'll bake a cake for him." "Mom, you're sick. You don't need to prepare anything." "Nonsense. To meet the boy who saved my life, I insist on making something special." Jonathan smiled at the lady's determination. "Miss Margaret, you don't need to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble, Mr. Jonathan. It's gratitude." After making sure Miss Margaret was comfortable and had taken her medication, Jonathan and Dorothy headed back home. "Dorothy, your mother is an impressive woman." "Yes, she is. She taught me everything about dignity and honest work, and you passed those values on to Ethan." "I tried to pass on the values I learned from her." When they arrived at the mansion, they found Ethan still awake, waiting on the living room sofa. "Miss Dorothy," he ran to hug her. "How is your mother?" "She's in pain, but tomorrow we will sort everything out." "And am I going to meet her?" "Yes, you are. She is eager to meet you." "Is she as nice as you?" "She is even nicer than me." "Impossible," Ethan said seriously, making Dorothy laugh. "Ethan," Jonathan approached. "Time for bed. Tomorrow will be an important day." "Dad, can I sleep in Miss Dorothy's room tonight?" "She is sleeping at her mother's house tonight, remember?" "Oh, right." Ethan was disappointed again. "But tomorrow night I will be here," Dorothy promised. "You promise?" "I promise." "Then it's okay." Ethan said goodnight to everyone and went up to his room. Dorothy got ready to leave when Jonathan called her. "Dorothy, before you go, I wanted to say something." "Of course, Mr. Jonathan. What happened today made me reflect on many things, about how I've been as a father, as an employer, as a person. You have always been a good employer, perhaps, but I haven't been a good observer. I didn't realize you were going through difficulties. I didn't realize how attached Ethan had become to you. I didn't realize I was delegating parental responsibilities to you. Mr. Reynolds, I never minded taking care of Ethan. On the contrary, it was a pleasure. I know, and that's why I want to formalize some changes. What kind of changes? First, we'll adjust your salary. You're taking on responsibilities far beyond those of a regular nanny. Mr. Reynolds, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. Second, I want you to officially become Ethan's tutor. Use your background in education to help him with his studies. That would be wonderful. And third, I want you to feel free to come to us if you have any personal problems. We're a family, and families help each other. Dorothy was visibly moved. Mr. Reynolds, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, just accept. I accept, of course I accept. Great. Tomorrow, after we sort out your mother's surgery, we'll talk about all the details. The next day, Jonathan kept his promise. He and Dorothy went to the bank in the morning, made the transfer to the hospital, and scheduled Miss Margaret's surgery for the afternoon. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The surgery was a complete success. Dr. Mitchell explained that they had operated just in time and that Ms. Margaret would make a full recovery. Ethan, who had insisted on going to the hospital, was fascinated to meet Dorothy's mother. Ms. Margaret, you look like Miss Dorothy, he observed. I'm the one who looks like her. Ms. Margaret laughed. She's the younger one. Are you Miss Dorothy's grandma? I'm her mother, my dear. Oh, so you're like my grandma too, right? The innocent question deeply moved Miss Margaret. If you'd like, I'd love to be your borrowed grandma. Borrowed grandma? Ethan found the concept funny. I accept. From that day on, the Reynolds family dynamic changed completely. Dorothy officially became Ethan's tutor. Ms. Margaret fully recovered from the surgery, and a new routine was established. Ethan began visiting Ms. Margaret regularly, learning traditional recipes and hearing stories about when Dorothy was a child. For him, it was like gaining a new grandmother. Victoria, who initially resisted the changes, gradually began to understand the value of having Dorothy more integrated into the family. She noticed that Ethan was happier and better cared for educationally. Jonathan found that by making Dorothy part of the family, he himself became more present in his son's life. Seeing Ethan's love for her inspired him to create his own special moments with the boy. 6 months later, on a Sunday afternoon, the whole family was gathered at Miss Margaret's house. Dorothy had prepared a special lunch. Ethan was helping Miss Margaret bake a cake, and Jonathan was watching the scene with a feeling of completeness he hadn't felt in years. Dad, Ethan approached him on the porch. Thank you. Thank you for what, son? For teaching me that doing the right thing is sometimes hard, but it's always worth it. Actually, you're the one who taught me that. How so? You showed me that generosity has no age, that love has no rules, and that family isn't just about who shares the same last name. Really? Really? You changed our family for the better, Ethan. And Miss Dorothy did too. And Miss Dorothy did too. They watched Dorothy and Miss Margaret in the kitchen, laughing about some conversation they were having. Dad, can I ask another question? Always. When I grow up, will I be a man like you? I hope you'll be much better than me, son. Better how? I hope you keep the big heart you already have now. I hope you never forget that helping people is important. And I hope you always manage to see what's right, even when the adults are confused. But what if I get confused too when I grow up? Then you remember today. Remember the day an 8-year-old boy taught an entire family what truly matters in life. What truly matters? Love, family, and taking care of those who take care of us. Ethan smiled and ran back to the kitchen, where he was greeted with hugs from Dorothy and Miss Margaret. Jonathan remained on the porch for a few more minutes, reflecting on how his life had changed. A year ago, he was a successful businessman with a seemingly perfect but emotionally distant family. Today, he was a present father, a fair boss, and part of an extended family that included two special women who had turned his house into a true home. The sound of laughter from the kitchen brought him back to the present. When he entered, he found Ethan with flour on his face, Dorothy trying to clean up the mess, and Miss Margaret laughing at the scene. "Daddy," Ethan ran to him, "come help us make the cake." "I don't know how to cook, son." "Grandma Margaret will teach you. She said anyone can learn if they really want to." Jonathan looked at Miss Margaret, who smiled encouragingly. "It's true, Mr. Jonathan. Cooking is like taking care of someone. It just needs tenderness and patience." "Then let's do it." Jonathan took off his jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. "Teach me." While learning to mix the cake ingredients, Jonathan thought about how that moment represented everything that had changed in his life. There he was, a millionaire businessman, learning to cook with a 67-year-old lady, while his son and the nanny tutor laughed at his clumsy attempts. "Dad, you're putting too much sugar," Ethan observed. "It's true," Dorothy confirmed, trying not to laugh. "Let him try," Ms. Margaret defended. "You learn by making mistakes." "How did you learn so much about life, Ms. Margaret?" Jonathan asked. "By living, Mr. Jonathan, and by paying attention to the people I love." "That's what Ethan did, isn't it? He paid attention to those he loves." "Exactly. Children are wiser than adults sometimes because they haven't forgotten how to love unconditionally." "Miss Dorothy loves unconditionally," Ethan said, licking batter off his finger. "That's why I wanted to help her." "And your father also decided to love unconditionally when he agreed to help," Miss Margaret added. "Is that true?" Ethan asked Jonathan. "It's true. You taught me to love better, son." The cake was ready by dinner time, and even though it was a bit lopsided and too sweet, it was unanimously declared the best cake they had ever eaten together. "Do you know what this cake represents?" Miss Margaret asked while they ate. "What?" Ethan wanted to know. "It represents that when people come together with love, even imperfect things become perfect." "Like our family," Ethan said. "Like our family," Jonathan agreed. That night, when they returned home, Ethan asked a question Jonathan would never forget. "Dad, if I hadn't insisted on helping Ms. Dorothy, do you think our family would be just as happy?" Jonathan thought carefully before answering. "No, son. I think we would be rich, comfortable, but not truly happy." "Why?" "Because true happiness comes from knowing you made a difference in someone's life, and you did that." "But you did too, Dad, and Mom is happier now too." It was true. Victoria had gradually embraced the changes in the family and now seemed more relaxed and present. "It's true. Do you know why everyone became happier?" "Why?" "Because when you do good for one person, the good comes back to you multiplied." "Like math." "Exactly, like math, but with feelings." 2 years had passed since that transformative day. The Reynolds family had become a benchmark for fair employers and a united family in their social circle. Dorothy had married her longtime boyfriend, who had patiently waited through the most difficult period of financial hardship. The wedding was celebrated at the Reynolds mansion, with Ethan as the ring-bearer, and Miss Margaret as the one who gave the bride away. Miss Margaret, fully recovered from surgery, had become Ethan's official surrogate grandmother and helped Dorothy with the boys' educational tasks. Jonathan had reduced his work hours and become a much more present father. He discovered that supervising Ethan's studies was more rewarding than any business meeting. Victoria had started a social project for scholarships for children of domestic employees, inspired by Dorothy's story. And Ethan. Ethan had become an even more generous and socially conscious boy. He had created a club at school called the Little Helpers Club, where children organized fundraisers to help school employees going through difficulties. On a special afternoon, when Ethan turned 10, the family organized a party at Miss Margaret's house, which had now become the official gathering place for the extended family. "Ethan," Jonathan called his son aside, "I have a special gift for you." "What is it, Dad?" Jonathan pulled a gold card from his pocket, identical to the one he had given 2 years earlier. "This card is yours. You can use it however you want." Ethan took the card and smiled. "Thank you, Dad, but this time I know exactly what I'm going to do with it." "What will you do?" "I'll save it to use when someone needs help. That way, I'll always be ready to make a difference." Jonathan hugged his son with pride. "You already make a difference every day, Ethan. I learned from you and from Ms. Dorothy. And from Grandma Margaret, too." "That's true. And I learned that having money is good, but using money to help people is much better." As the family gathered to sing Happy Birthday, Jonathan reflected on the journey they had taken. Everything had started with the impulsive decision to give a credit card to his son. He could never have imagined that decision would completely change the family dynamic and make them better people. "What are you thinking about?" Dorothy approached. "I'm thinking about how an 8-year-old boy managed to teach so much to the adults." "Children are our best teachers, Mr. Jonathan. They remind us of what really matters." "And what really matters?" "Love, family, and always being ready to extend a hand to those in need." "Thank you, Dorothy." "Why?" "For taking such good care of Ethan, for allowing him to develop that generous heart. I just showed him what was already inside him. You and Ms. Victoria raised a special boy." "The 3 of us raised him together," Jonathan corrected. "We're a family." "We're a family," Dorothy agreed, smiling. The cake was served, the presents were opened, and stories were told. But the most special gift of all wasn't wrapped. It was the certainty that they had built a family based on love, generosity, and mutual care. When the party ended and everyone was saying goodbye, Ethan made a statement that perfectly summarized what they had learned together. "You know what I discovered? Doing good isn't hard. What's hard is remembering to do good when we're busy with other things. But when we remember, everything gets better." "And how do we remember?" Ms. Margaret asked. "We pay attention to the people we love, and if they're sad, we ask why. And if they need help, we help. It's as simple as that." The simplicity and wisdom of Ethan's words kept echoing in everyone's minds. A child had summarized in just a few sentences what many adults take a lifetime to learn. Years later, when Ethan was already a teenager, he still kept that gold card. Not because he needed it financially, but because it represented a lesson that had transformed his family. That true wealth isn't in what you can buy, but in what you can do for others. And every time someone in his life needed help, Ethan remembered that day when he decided to use his birthday gift to save his second mother's mom. And he remembered that sometimes the best decisions come from the heart, not the head. The Reynolds family's story became legendary in their social circle, not because of the money they had, but because of the generosity they showed. And it all started with an 8-year-old boy who decided that the best gift he could receive was being able to help someone he loved. Dorothy still worked with the family, but now as Ethan's official tutor and educational coordinator of the foundation Victoria had created. Ms. Margaret continued to be the most beloved borrowed grandmother a child could have. And Jonathan had learned that being a good father didn't just mean providing material comfort, but being emotionally present and teaching by example that caring for others is both a responsibility and a privilege. The final great lesson came a few years later, when Ethan was in college. He called home on a Sunday afternoon. "Dad, remember that card you gave me when I was 8? "Of course I remember." "Why?" "I used it today." "Really? For what?" "There's a college friend here who's going through hard times. His family lost everything in a flood. I paid his tuition for next semester." "And how do you feel?" "I feel like when I was 8 and decided to help Miss Dorothy. I feel complete." "You grew up remembering the right lessons, Ethan." "I learned from the best teachers, my family." When he hung up, Jonathan called Dorothy and Victoria to share the news. The 3 hugged, proud of the man Ethan was becoming. "We did it," Victoria said. "Did what?" Jonathan asked. "Raised a good person, someone who will make a difference in the world." "That's the greatest success we can have as parents," Dorothy added. And it was true. The Reynolds family's greatest fortune wasn't in bank accounts or properties, but in the generous heart of the son they had raised together, and in the expanded family they had built based on love and mutual care. Years passed, and the story became a family tradition. Every year on Ethan's birthday, someone would tell again about the day an 8-year-old boy decided to use his gift to help someone he loved, and how that decision transformed not just one family, but all the lives that family touched. Because that's the truth about generosity, it multiplies. One good deed inspires another, one generous heart awakens other hearts, and in the end, the world becomes a little better because someone decided to make the right choice. And it all started with a gold card, a boy with a big heart, and the wisdom to understand that the best gift we can give is love in action. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story and where you're watching from. Do you believe small acts of kindness can transform entire families? Leave your sincere opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.